All right, we are live, everyone. Okay, so we're gonna argue about whether or not God exists. So first, do you have any arguments for God that you would like to present?
Well, I think generally when I argue for the existence of God, I tend to argue generally more in principle that if the Christian worldview is true, then no other worldview can be true. And then I try to argue from the other person's worldview and a whole host of other worldviews in order to show that the Christian position is the only position that's able to account for human intelligibility.
Okay, so why is the Christian worldview the only worldview that can account for human intelligibility?
Well, I think the answer to the question is that I think there's a few answers. One, I'm not a pluralist, so I don't believe that multiple worldviews are able to account for these things. I'm not talking about that you may
Well,
not.
That's just kind of restating the point that I wanted you to justify.
Right. Well, I'm telling you why I believe it. So it's kind of self-explanatory. I believe that only one worldview, because I'm not a pluralist. If you're a pluralist, you believe that multiple people, in fact, maybe everyone can be right, even though they may have mutually even though they can have mutually exclusive positions or contradictory positions. I don't believe that at all. I think that if positions are contradicting one another, then one position has to be true. And so in principle, as I stated earlier, the Christian worldview has to be true because the other worldviews are not true. Okay. And so now, for example, we can go through the standard of empiricism. We can show empiricism to be a self-refuting standard, because if a person says that all knowledge must be gained through observation, well, we have a belief that itself is not gained through observation. That worldview goes down.
Sure. So let's say that I was just that someone was to take a view of very minimal theism, which said that there's some deity which exists and provides for, the transcendentals and stuff, but they're not perfectly morally good, and they don't causally interact with the world beyond creating it. What phenomenon can that worldview not explain? You're muted.
Okay, I was typing out what you said. So you said they don't interact with the world beyond having created it?
Correct. And they establish the transcendentals and such. So like they I don't know. I don't think we have reason to accept this, but let's say that we take the view that like logic needs constant maintenance by some deity. They can just say, okay, this deity constantly maintains logic and such, but is not morally good and is not the deity of Christianity. What would be your argument against that deity?
Well, the first argument to that would be, well, how do they provide the preconditions for human intelligibility? How do they provide the preconditions apart from knowing that God, apart from that God speaking, apart from that God revealing himself in the world and interacting with the world? The person is just positing some sort of ad hoc argument saying, well, let's just assume we have a worldview that does it. Well, I agree there's a worldview that does it, namely the Christian worldview. So you giving me a hypothetical is not really helpful.
But the question is, what phenomenon can that not explain?
Well, we're not saying that it can't explain how the world is here. That's never been the Christian position. I mean, a Muslim can explain how the world is here. An atheist can explain naturalistically how the world is here. The question is, who can provide the preconditions for intelligibility? And a person that has a God that hasn't interacted with the world is not capable of doing that.
Well, they can just say God makes the world intelligible to us.
Well, yeah, I agree with that. God does make the world intelligible to us, but the question would have to be, by what means does God do that? How does he do that?
Well, because God is omnipotent.
Okay, are you going to flesh that out? Are you going to add meat to the bones? Or are you just going to say,
well, wait, what details do you want?
Well, I'm not going to do your homework for you, right? You're going to have to provide me.
Okay, this God is omnipotent. He has infinite power. He makes a world that's intelligible to us. Is there anything else you want to know about this God?
How is the God? So I guess the question still is, how do we know that God? The God does not. So we have a contradictory position from the start. The God doesn't interact with the world, but yet he interacts with the world in order to make it intelligible to us. So now you've just given me a position that just falls flat on its face.
Well,
It's
wait.
contradictory.
What do you mean? What, like,
Well,
God
you can
make
see.
God well God makes it so that the world is something that we can understand through human reasoning. But this God does not make it. But this God does not interact with the world on a daily basis.
No, impossible, because metaphysics is inherently tied to epistemology. So what you're giving me is something akin to, can God make a square circle, right? Just because you say he has omnipotence and therefore he does it, well, you're actually giving me a logical impossibility,
What
because metaphysics is inherently
Okay,
tied to epistemology.
so if it's an impossibility, what would be the proposition that's being both affirmed and negated?
Well, so you would have this world where God does not interact, which means he's not involved. And then you have a world where he's providing, which means he's now interacting. To the means of provision is a form of interacting. So now you have a worldview that is contradicting itself.
He doesn't interact on a daily basis. He made the world, and then he does not interact after that point, beyond as is necessary to establish the transcendentals.
No, but that's not, see, but that wouldn't be that wouldn't be possible. Okay, so you're saying he made it to establish the transcendentals, but one of the necessary elements here is that God interacts with us such that we
Why?
can know. Because you can't just have, well, let me see how I can explain it without restating it. Your epistemology and metaphysics are tied to one another. In order to know, you have to have an idea of what is being known. And so if there is an unknowable metaphysic, then you don't have a workable epistemology. And so to say that God hasn't interacted with us after he's created the world, then you actually have a worldview without a metaphysic, because the person couldn't they couldn't cash it out. So he could have done it, but you wouldn't know that.
So we're positing this as a potential hypothesis. We say, okay, we see the world is here. We have your hypothesis of how the world is here. We have this other hypothesis. Now, even though on this other hypothesis, God does not, reveal himself such that we have to actually do further reasoning to figure out which hypothesis is better. You have to actually make an argument for why we necessarily have accurate divine revelation, because there's no logical necessity of God revealing himself to us in the world. There could just be a God who exists, makes the world, but it's not the Christian God.
Well, I agree with that. I agree that there could be a God conceivably who created the world and was not the Christian God. But you're going to have to defend how that God provides the preconditions for human intelligibility. You haven't done that.
What do you mean by the conditions for human intelligibility?
So we're talking about what's necessary for knowledge, for us to be able to speak of things, and he makes the world
that we can figure out with our reasoning skills, and he makes it so that our reasoning skills are robust through the process of evolution. What's wrong with that account?
The problem with the account is that the metaphysic is not workable. There is no metaphysic here. We don't know if we don't know what goes beyond the world or what's ultimate in the world, then how are you speaking about anything? So you're essentially
I'm saying
it's kind of like, if I, do you mind if I just say that? Ahead. Yeah, thank you for that. So it's kind of like if I said, you have a God that creates the world in such a way that there are married bachelors. He said, well, how does he do that? Well, he creates the world such that. Yeah, so you're providing a hypothetical that's actually logically impossible.
Yeah, so in the married bachelor example, the reason why a married bachelor is impossible is because it would affirm a contradiction. Contradiction would be it both is and is not the case that the person is married, which would be a contradiction, right? So what is the contradiction on the view that God makes the world intelligible to us?
Yeah, I think a better word is incoherent. How do you have an epistemology apart from a metaphysic?
Okay, so what a contradiction is it's saying that a proposition is both true and false. So what proposition would be both true and false on this view?
Okay, so let's scratch the word contradiction. I'd say it's an incoherent notion that you can have an epistemology without a metaphysic. You cannot talk about what is known without...
But But before we go on to whether or not it's incoherent, do you agree that it's not a? So if it is a contradiction, you should be able to tell me what proposition is being both affirmed and negated. Do you think that there is a proposition that's being both affirmed and negated? And if so, what is that proposition?
Well, we talked earlier that God not interacting with the world, but at the same time interacting with the world, would be a contradiction. But the bigger issue.
But before we go into the bigger issue, so why would this view entail that God is interacting with the world?
Well, he's providing the basis for human intelligibility. That provision
that doesn't require
interaction.
Yeah, but that doesn't require interacting on a daily basis. It can just be the way that he made the world.
Daily basis, but
okay, so he interacted with the world a long time ago. That doesn't mean he's interacting with it now.
No. Does he interact with the world? Okay, so this is an important question. Does he interact with the world prior to creation or prior to there being people who he's able to interact with?
No. Or sorry,
okay, so
I misspoke. I meant to say yes. Okay, so he interacts. He interacts. Well, just to clarify, he interacts to the degree that he creates a world. This world has certain properties, including being intelligible to human beings once we evolve. What's wrong with this account?
Yeah, the problem with the account is it really doesn't explain anything. It just kind of begs the question, right? It kind of just says that the world is intelligible, but it doesn't actually explain how. So
this deity is omnipotent. He can do whatever he wants. He makes the world intelligible.
No, I don't grant that.
Well, okay, I know you don't grant it, but my claim is not that you accept this. My claim is just that this provides an equally good account of the world. That you can levy no arguments as to why your account of how the world got here is more plausible. So what things can your view explain that this view cannot explain?
Well, the difference between my view and that view is simple that there is a working metaphysic. You haven't given me a metaphysic yet. You've just given me epistemology.
What metaphysical things is this view missing? What elements of metaphysics does this view not provide for?
Well, how do you have a system where a person knows about something, but they don't know? Sorry, how do you have a person acquiring knowledge without there being something to acquire? That's what I'm saying. You have
there is something to acquire. There's an external world that we can figure out as a result of the world being made such that we can figure out things about it. What's wrong with that account?
No. No, you're going to need a system by which the creator is interacting with you in a way where he speaks to you about this world. Because if you don't have a basis by which a creator is, and I'm not talking about God having to speak to an individual on a personal basis in terms of a one-on-one conversation, but I'm talking about there needs to be a basis by which a person knows, because in order to acquire knowledge about the world, you're going to have to know what is knowable.
Yeah, we acquire knowledge because the world is made such that it is knowable through our skills of reasoning, so we can know things about the world, because that's how the world was made by this deity.
Explain to me. Yeah, no, you have to explain that to me. It doesn't make any sense to me.
What things need explanation?
The entire thing. Just unpack the entire thing.
There's a deity who establishes all the metaphysical things. He establishes logic, sets, mathematical truth, modal truths, moral truths, makes a world that we can discover through reasoning, and then leaves and doesn't interact with the world after that. He can do all these things because he's omnipotent.
Let me see how I can word this. I don't know that I. So you said he establishes. No, I think it's incoherent.
What things can't it explain?
Well, I'm not saying that the view. Okay, so let's say that we were to live in a world where this was something like this would be possible. Then this worldview, it's almost akin to saying, if we were to live in a world where there was, and this is just an analogy, it's not identical, so there's some problems with the connections here, but the general point that I'm making is that you have a view that insufficiently explains another, or something like that. So when you say that there is a married bachelor, the problem with that is it's just not only that it's logically contradictory, but greater than that, it's incoherent. It would be incoherent to utter such a thing.
It is incoherent.
So it's incoherent.
Yeah, it's incoherent by virtue of being a logical contradiction. Do you think there's a logical contradiction? And if not, where's the incoherency?
Well, I've already, like, I don't want to repeat myself. Like,
well, wait. You have not given a contradiction, and you've repeatedly asserted that it's incoherent, without giving a warrant for why it's incoherent, beyond asking me to explain things. Okay, so what about it is incoherent?
Yeah, I've already explained that it's incoherent because of the fact that you don't have a working metaphysic, and you can't just assert. No, but you can't. No. You can't just say I have this. You have to actually flesh out that system, because by just simply saying that, then of course, right? You could.
Well, this being's omnipotent. This being makes a working metaphysic. What else do you like? What other things need to be explained? Like, I mean, what other things?
Yeah, but it's so funny. A part of a working metaphysic is actually being able to interact with that creator, so that you are able to discern whether or not the things that are known
for a working metaphysic.
Well, it's necessary because you have a principle of continuity and discontinuity, where a person who doesn't know everything could somehow be wrong in what they know, because something outside of what they know can contradict the very thing that they know. And so the way that it helps having a creator is that creator fills in the gaps between what we don't know. So, for example, you'd have to explain how there's laws of nature, how there's uniformity of nature. How does God establish all of those things?
So the deity, same way your God does. This deity is omnipotent. He wills it to be, and it is.
But I think
he's omnipotent. There's no greater account that needs to be given, because he can do whatever he wants.
Well, define omnipotent.
All powerful. Can do any non-logically contradictory thing. Anything that can be done logically can be done by the omnipotent entity.
Yeah, so then explain to me how, and under this view, you could know things apart from...
Because the world is made such that we can figure things out about it.
That's vagary. That's not actually an answer. You have to tell me about that.
So this deity wants us to be able to know things, so he makes a world that we can figure out things. How he does it is he wills it to be the case, because he's omnipotent.
That's so vague.
Well, wait, what details do you need?
Yeah, well, it's vague. It doesn't really answer anything.
It's
akin to saying he does what is necessary to do. Okay, well then he does.
Okay, so I don't need a greater account when he's omnipotent and he can do anything that he wants. Okay, so what details are you missing? Like what things are you not sure how he does?
Yeah, actually, you do need a greater account, because you have to explain
what things are you not sure how he does.
So you would have to explain how it is under this system a person can not know everything but know something, and
the God makes it so that this God makes it so this God is omnipotent. Do whatever he wants.
Then Christianity makes it just so that God can't be omnipotent.
Well, okay. So
is that a good answer? I mean, if we were debating, and if we were having a discussion, and you were to say to me, well, how you brought up a logical contradiction with the Bible, and I say God makes it such that those contradictions are possible. God makes it such because he's omnipotent. He just wills it to be the case.
Well, yeah. If I ask you how God created the world, you would say he does, because he's omnipotent. He just wills it to be, and then the world was made.
That wasn't the point that I made. The point
that was the point that I made.
When you bring up omnipotence does not negate incoherent notions.
Okay, but what you haven't told me what's incoherent.
You can't just say he just wills it to be so. Well, I'm explaining. You can't just say He wills it to be so, and therefore it is. Well, no. You have to go into details. So
What details do you need?
I don't know how profitable it is to sort of kind of beat a dead horse, because I don't think we're going to move from here, because I don't think you're answering the questions, and I think I've given a sufficient answer.
What details are you missing? What details do you need? Because right now you're just appealing to the vague. You're just vaguely gesturing to the fact that my account is vague, without giving anything that my account cannot explain. And without, like, okay, what details do you need?
Yeah, I think we should move on to probably
before we move on,
questions.
Before we move on, can you tell me a detail that you need in order to understand my account?
Well, I've repeated it a couple times, but I'll say it one more time. I'll bring up the fact that it's an incoherent idea that a person can know something without giving an account for how they make up for the things they don't know.
I gave an account.
And by making a simple answer,
I gave an account. The account is that this deity makes it so that the world is such that through reasoning and careful reflection, we can figure out things about the world. How does he do that? He wills it to be the case because he's omnipotent.
Yeah.
Okay. Sure. So I don't think you have an... Okay, so if this account explains all of the data that your account does, then if we assign even...
it didn't explain anything. You gave no explanation.
I explained everything.
You just simply said, believe that this happens. You didn't actually flesh anything out. You didn't, you didn't give an answer for anything at all.
There's no greater explanation that's needed because this being is omnipotent. You can do whatever you want.
Yeah, you didn't actually answer any.
I answered every question. You were not able to give anything you can't explain. But we can move on. We can move on to the problem of evil if you'd like. Okay. So I see. Well, so the framing issue for the problem of evil would be that if my account can explain everything that your account can, then even if we say that the problem of evil only slightly reduces our credence in your account, given that my account is perfectly compatible with evil because this deity is not perfectly good, my account would just be a better account than yours. So my case for the problem of evil would be simple. Let's imagine that you were in a position where you could, at very little cost to yourself, or literally no cost to yourself, you could prevent a child from dying of malaria. You should do that, right? Just yes or no. You should, if you could at no cost to yourself prevent a child from dying of malaria, you should do that, correct?
Without further context, yes.
Okay, so now I think that if a person did not do that and allowed a child to die of malaria and then offered up a whole host of, and then we would not accept any of the excuses you give for why God does not do that with malaria. And so you're about to fire off, presumably, a series of justifications, and all of those could apply equally well to a person who just does not prevent children from dying of malaria, no cost to themselves. Okay, so what would be your account of why God does not save children from malaria when he can at no cost to? Yeah, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Oh, what happened?
Hello? Can people in the chat hear me?
I can't hear you. Hold on. Sorry. One second.
Wait, can people in the chat hear me?
Yeah, I cannot hear you. One second.
You can't? Wait, okay. People in the chat, can someone say something about whether or not they can hear me?
I can't.
Can you hear me now?
Uh-oh.
Okay, yeah. Wait, so...
Uh-oh. Okay.
Okay, try leaving and rejoining.
Okay, what's happening? All right, do you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
I can't hear you.
Okay, check.
Oh, shoot. Okay. And someone says I'm cucking out. Yeah, right. Okay, let me here, let me see if I can figure out what's happening here. I don't know why that's doing that. Here, I'll leave and then come back.
Okay. Okay, hey everyone. Hey, all 7 of you who are watching. I mean, okay, I think that just the account that's been given, like, of what my view allegedly can't explain. I mean, the view that I gave can explain everything that his view can, and the repeated assertions that it's incoherent was not an explanatory deficit. And the claim that was made repeatedly was that, well, my view can't explain how these things happen. Well, he's omnipotent. He wills it to be the case, same way that your God does. Yeah, I mean, I think that the only way to win that Christianity is more plausible than deism would be you would have to win the historical argument. Yeah, I'm an atheist. The other guy's a Christian. So the only way I think to win Christianity is more plausible than other counts would be, I think you would have to win that the historical argument in favor of Christianity is sufficiently strong that it outweighs all the arguments against Christianity. And well, he's not making a historical argument. So, I mean, I guess you could also make an argument from prophecy that, yeah, repeated assertions of incoherence is not a deficit. Wow, I'm not even speaking, and the number of viewers is increasing. Pretty cool. Hey, can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can. Sorry, that was super
Okay,
weird.
cool. Yeah, so where we were at in the conversation. So I think that I was raising the problem of evil. So like basically thousands of children die every day from things that God could prevent. God didn't have to even create them in the first place. But so I think that it's analogous to if a person made a disease or established a causal mechanism for a disease to be brought into the world. And then the excuses that I think you'll give, I think are we'll see in the context of if a person raised them as a justification for why they either did not prevent people from dying of malaria or made malaria in the first place, we'll see how inadequate they are. So what would be your account for example, why God either brings malaria into existence or sets up the causal mechanism for malaria to exist via the fall, or just does not prevent malaria from existing?
Well, yeah, that's a good question. I think the first answer biblically would be that God made man upright, but man sought out many schemes. And so the Lord actually puts upon a plague onto humanity. And so that plague is to dramatically not only punish man for his rebellion, but it also is to go it's also to show how much in need of a savior that we are.
Okay, so the person who does not prevent the children from dying of malaria, when asked about it, says, well, malaria was as a result of humans' errors, and he wants to bring it down as a scourge to show how much man is in need of salvation. You wouldn't accept that account, would you?
Well, I think there's a violation there. There's a creator-creature distinction. And so from a human level, the Lord would have us do what we can to prevent people from dying. However, it's within God's plan that people die. And so it's actually...
Why does God's plan include babies dying of malaria in agony and terror?
Well, let me finish the first part. The answer is that God has the right over life. Man doesn't, and really, well, okay. So man ought.
So let's say I had a child, and then I allowed my child to get malaria when I could have made it so they didn't get malaria at no cost to myself. Then when asked why, I said, A, I'm punishing my child for man's sin. B, I have the right over my child's life because I brought them into existence, and it's part of my plan that my child's going to die. Would you accept that account?
No,
so why do you accept God's account?
Because it's not analogous. Man doesn't have the man. No, it's not a good analogy because man doesn't have the right. Well, because man doesn't have the right over his child's life, being what we would consider a derivative creator. God being ultimate creator has the right over man's life. Ultimately, man doesn't have that, so it wouldn't be.
Why does being the ultimate creator give God the right to allow babies to die horrible, painful deaths for no good reason? Why does it vindicate him morally when he does that?
Well, I didn't use it as a vindication of God morally.
Well, you did. You said that it's okay because God is the ultimate creator. Like, let's say that there was just one entity in a universe, and they brought children into existence, and then those children, they killed them with disease, and they could prevent the children from being killed with disease at no cost to themselves. They're the creator of everything. Yeah, Matthew, I did falsify the Christian God. So they're the creator of everything, and they just bring they bring babies into existence, and then they cause them to die horrible, painful deaths. Would you think that agent would be vindicated morally?
I didn't hear everything because you were breaking up on my end. I don't know about over the stream.
Yeah, so I'll re-explain. Okay, so let's just say there's only one entity in the universe. This is just a alternative reality. Okay, there's just one entity. That entity brings a bunch of new entities into existence and then causes them to die painful deaths from disease. Would you think that entity is acting morally?
I would say, without knowing the reasons for why that being does that, I couldn't judge it.
You couldn't judge a being who just brings entities into existence and allows them to die of horrible, painful diseases for no good reason?
Well, if there's no good reason, I would say that, but the Lord has a good reason.
What's the Lord's good reason?
The Lord doesn't give us the reason.
Okay, well, how do you know there is a reason?
And it's not necessary. Hold on.
How do you know there's a reason?
It's not necessary. Well, I'm giving you the Christian position. It's not. So if you're going to falsify the Christian God, you're going to have to be consistent with my position. Okay. It's not necessary. So one, it's not necessary for me to know why the person is doing that. Just like it's not necessary for me to know why people are arrested to know that the arrests are just. It's not necessary for me to know why God's doing it. God does have a good reason for doing it, and so I don't.
Well, I think in the arrest case, if you saw a person was arresting millions of people, torturing them post arrest, and then the people had not committed any crime, then I think that you would assume that this was not a just arrest. So let's say that the person is just
that was a major problem. So, because man is born into sin and man is sinful from
So this person who's spawning the babies and causing them to die of disease says, look, the babies that I'm spawning, they're born into sin. You don't have to know exactly why I'm doing it. But what they do just every day, they just have a batch of 1,000 babies who they just bring into existence, and then they make it so that they get disease and then die horrible, painful deaths. And you ask them why.
That's just an appeal to emotion, right? I mean, honestly, but it is. It really is, because even from a human level,
it's not an appeal to emotion. Okay, it's an analogy, really, right? But
it's an analogy that appeals to emotion, right? I mean, you really can't just say, well, there's a man in the factory who kills 1,000 babies a day. If he kills 1,000 babies a day, there may be a justification for that. Like, for example, if you're an atheist and you believe in pro-choice, I mean, there are cases where people believe that millions of babies ought to be slaughtered, right?
Well, okay, but even atheists who are pro-choice would presumably say that spawning babies into existence and then causing them to die painful deaths would not be a moral thing, right?
But an atheist that would be pro-choice would actually affirm the fact that a woman's usurps, so it's justified actually killing of the baby.
Well, okay.
So
we don't need to go into what the pro-choice position is, because I don't think that's what most pro-choice people would say. But just
but the reason, hold on, but that is important, because you're giving a human analogy, and I gave you a human analogy where people kill literally millions of babies a year, and their justification, sometimes they don't even tell you their justification, but we have to trust that they have a justification for the murder of babies. And if you believe in pro-choice, one second, let me just say this. And if you believe in pro-choice, the pro-choice position, then you would believe that there is a justification for some killing of babies. And so likewise,
don't consider it killing babies.
Oh, well, that's not true. It depends on who you talk to.
Right. Some do, most don't. I disagree with the position of the pro-choicers who are in favor, who think it's a baby but are fine with killing babies. But if your
that's not my point.
If your position is that your God is as moral as these pro-choice people who are fine with killing babies, then
No. That what I was doing was what you would call an internal critique. I didn't say
well, okay, but
but
I'm not in favor like if I held a position, right?
I'm taking a position. I'm
Yeah,
not. I wasn't
it can't
saying
be an
that God is
internal
as
critique
moral
if
as these
it's not
people.
my view.
No, you can do an internal critique of a position that is out there. I was just using that instance. I was just using.
It's not an
I'm
internal
not saying you
critique
hold that
against. It's not an
position.
internal critique against me if it's
I
somebody
agree.
else's view. Okay, so
I
your
agree. But what
God.
I'm
Wait, so
Mhm.
so your God is analogous to a case where a person is just bringing babies into existence and then causing them to die painful deaths. And then they claim that there's some good reason. And they have this devoted group of followers who agree that there's a good reason, despite the fact that they can't give a justification for it. But they just ask you to trust that there is a justification. And then, would you accept that account in the case of the ultimate creator who's just spawning everyone into existence and then killing them of disease?
Well, how would you know they didn't have a good reason for it?
Well, we wouldn't, but we see every single day they spawn.
Say that one more time. I didn't hear that. Could you say that one more time?
Yeah, so we don't know with certainty if they have a good reason. However,
is it possible they have a good reason?
It is in theory possible. However,
okay, good.
However, every single day, what happens is they wave their hand and they make 1,000 babies, and then all of those babies are dead by the end of the day, and they died a painful death of malaria or of some other horrific disease, flesh-eating parasites, let's say.
So let's go back.
They have a good reason. It's in theory, it could be the case that they have a good reason, but I wouldn't bet on it. If thousands of children die every day, and you say that there's some good reason, but you can't give me a good reason for almost any evil in the world.
Yeah. It doesn't. But to be honest with you, you don't actually have to bet on it being a good reason. All you're simply saying is highly unlikely. You're not. So you haven't actually falsified the Christian position.
I haven't falsified. Well, I'm giving inductive arguments.
Right. But okay, great. But you haven't. But that doesn't disprove the fact that the Christian God exists. All you're simply saying is probably likely. Probably you're saying it's more probable than not. Okay, but if it's more probable than not, the implication of that is it's still likely that he exists. So even if
that's not the implication. The implication is it's possible that he exists, but not that it's likely that he exists.
All right, I misspoke. You're right.
I will grant you.
So what's the argument that God does not exist? Because you were giving one.
I don't have an argument. I don't have an argument that rules out with complete certainty the possibility of the existence of God, because it's always possible to say that maybe there's some reason for this thing that you can't explain, but I don't know what it is. Okay, but if I can give you a series of phenomenon that you have no ability to explain at all, and then you suppose that there's some explanation for it, when in no other context would you accept that there's some sufficient explanation, well, then I take your view to be extremely implausible.
But you can't even say that it's implausible, because
I can. I've given an inductive argument. The problem with evil, I've run it as an inductive argument.
You haven't. No, you didn't give a good argument, because your argument presupposed.
I didn't say it was good. I said it was inductive.
Well, it wasn't a good argument, because you already started from the beginning saying that God did not have a good reason. You said, what if they have no reason at all for doing it? Well, then I agree that it'd be unjust. But God does have a reason for doing it. And then you ask, well, what was his reason? But I don't have to give his reason for doing it.
How do you know he has a good reason?
What's the argument? No. I don't even have to answer that. What argument is there that establishes that I have to know the reason in order for it to be good?
Well, you don't have to know the reason, but if you suppose that there's a morally sufficient reason for every single bad thing in the world, but you cannot tell me the morally sufficient reason for any bad thing in the world, and not only that, but your view is that there is a morally sufficient reason for all the bad things in the world, every single one, but that whatever
I believe God's word.
Right.
I mean, when you have a being who himself institutes.
Let me finish, okay? But whatever the morally sufficient reason is, it's something that God, despite his omnipotence, needs the babies to die for, needs thousands of babies every day to die for whatever his justification is. The babies have to die for it. And despite the fact that there's some morally sufficient reason for God to bring about every single bad thing, such that the world is better for those things having existed. It's still good to try to get rid of those. And despite that, God does not tell us what the reasons are, and you can't give any account of what the reasons are. It is in theory possible that there's some mysterious
That's
explanation.
not true. Yeah, that's a misrepresentation. You can't say I didn't give an account, because I did give an account. There
No,
is
you didn't.
a good
You
reason.
said the account
We
is that there is a reason which you can't tell me.
That's right. No, but God has
That's an
spoken
account. That's
that
just
there's
an
a good
appeal.
reason.
That's just appealing to the fact that there is an account out there, but you can't tell me what it is.
Well, I think it's important for the atheist who is going to argue against the Christian God and say, well, God, you've done some moral atrocity. You're going to have to establish there wasn't a justification for what happened. Now, earlier I brought up the fall, but that's only one instance, or not. Sorry, that's only one. That's only one explanation of why he's doing what he's doing.
Okay,
But I don't know all the details. I can give you some of the details, but I don't know all of them.
I'll explain why the fall explanation doesn't work. That explanation falls, pun intended, prey to the objection that there's no logical reason why God had to make it the case that when Adam ate from the tree, that every single bad thing that happened in the world happened. God could have made it the case that when Adam ate from the tree, malaria didn't pop into existence. Right? So if you knew that a terrorist, or not even a terrorist, if you knew that there was a baby who was going to like walk around, and then you set down a bunch of landmines that would make it so that when the baby walked around, it created this massive explosion that killed millions of people, and your justification for it was the baby is the one who stepped on the landmines, then you have to actually justify why you put the landmines in the first place. You have to justify why God made it.
I thought
when they ate from the tree, they got malaria.
Yeah, I thought that was the point that you were making. The point still, even in the, you kind of smuggled it into the back door. You kind of presuppose that he doesn't have a good explanation for it. You're still presupposing that even though he uses. So I agree, conceivably, God did not have to create a world where there was malaria. But you're not actually saying that this wasn't the best possible world in the grand scheme of things, that God created it that way.
I gave you arguments.
Do you agree with that, or do you disagree?
Oh, no, I disagree with that. I gave you an argument for why there can't be a sufficient reason. God's omnipotent. So the nature of a sufficient reason for bad things is that you have a bad thing, but it's necessary for a greater good. If you're omnipotent, you can bring about the greater good without needing the bad thing. Okay? So that proves that there can't be some morally sufficient reason for all the bad things.
Yeah, let me think about.
And even if it's logically possible for there to be a morally sufficient reason for all the bad things, the just inductive case based on the sheer extent of the bad things, such that there's almost certainly more suffering than happiness in the world, provides a very, very strong inductive case against there being a God.
No, I disagree with that. I think that it would be almost impossible to establish, even if you appeal to the fact that God is omnipotent, that he's not wielding his power in the best possible way
I just gave you two arguments for it.
No, you just assumed it. You just stated that there could be no.
So I can repeat the two arguments. I can repeat the two arguments. So no, I did. So I'll repeat the first argument, which is that there cannot be a morally sufficient reason for every bad thing in the world, because if there was a morally sufficient reason, then the nature of a morally sufficient reason is that you have a bad thing, but it's necessary for a greater good. And if you're omnipotent, you don't need a bad thing for a greater good, because you can, with a wave of the omnipotent wand, bring about the good thing without needing the bad thing. The second part of the explanation was, even if it's logically possible that there's a morally sufficient reason for all the bad things in the world, there's a strong inductive case, there's a strong evidentiary case on the basis of the... What? That was weird. Hey, okay.
Yeah. Let me respond to that. So I think it actually depends on what that good thing is that God is bringing about. God cannot demonstrate his mercy. God cannot demonstrate his mercy from saving sinners when there are no sinners to save. Okay, so it actually depends on what the greatest good is, and the greatest good ultimately is to glorify God to glorify himself. And so you actually
why can't God get people to glorify himself without needing thousands of babies to die every day from painful disease?
How is it that God could be glorified in saving sinners if there are no sinners?
Why does God need to be glorified in saving sinners? He can just glorify
It's
himself.
one of his
Well, and
attributes.
also,
It's
okay,
one of God's attributes.
okay,
And so from the
why,
Christian, yeah, so
so
from the
why is it his
Christian
attribute? Why
perspective,
does he
yeah,
care about
this
saving
isn't
sinners?
yeah, this is what we call an external critique, right? You're asking the
I know.
Christian,
Yeah, it's an external critique.
yeah, but you're gonna have to come onto my ground and
No,
tell me why my
external
ground.
critiques are a class of
No,
critiques.
but
Right?
yeah,
I'm not running an internal critique. I'm running an
It's
external.
time for bed.
1 second. Oh, sorry, that was Alexa telling me it was time for bed. Okay, so I forgot what I was gonna say. You
You were
brought up a
saying it was
point.
an external critique, which is true, but not an objection.
Well, no, because from the Christian perspective, the greatest good is God glorifying Himself.
Why?
And so if
Okay,
the
why
greatest
does
good
he need to
is God
glorify?
glorifying
Yeah.
Him.
So no, I heard you say that.
But I
Why
don't
does
even
he
have
need
to.
to glorify?
Wait, hold on 1 second.
Right. So
I don't even
no,
have to.
but
1 second.
wait, Faith and
Hold
Films.
on.
The question
Well,
is, why does he need to? Why does he need to do that by saving sinners particularly? Why can't he glorify himself in other ways?
Well, because God is saving by nature. God is good by good. God is good
Why
by
does he need to
nature.
save sinners to glorify himself? That seems fairly self-flagellating.
Well, actually, it's not when you're the greatest good, and your desire is for those people to enjoy the greatest good. So it's actually not.
Okay, so does God want there to be sinners?
It doesn't have to be the greatest good. Doesn't have to be outside of Himself.
Does God want there to be sinners?
In some sense, yes.
Okay, He wants there to be sinners so He can save them. Okay,
well, not only saved, but He's also glorified.
Okay,
in His wrath.
why can't God?
Wrath is an attribute of God.
Okay, why can't God express wrath and make sinners without needing babies to die of malaria, given that that's a natural fact about the world rather than a fact about human agency?
Sorry, say that one more time.
Why can't God make it so that He glorifies Himself and saves sinners without making babies die of malaria, given that that's a natural fact about the world rather than a fact about human agency?
God hasn't given us the explanation. God hasn't given us the answer.
So I gave an argument as to why God cannot have a sufficient reason. The nature of morally sufficient reason is that something bad is necessary for some greater good, but if God's omnipotent, He does not need bad things for a greater good, because He can just do the greater good without needing the bad things. You appealed to the fact that God needs to save people in order to glorify Himself. But that does not get you out of the argument, because God can save people and glorify Himself without needing babies to die of malaria.
What would he be saving? No.
But you could save people from their sins.
See, this is why
sinners. There just don't need to be natural evils.
No, this is why it still presupposes that I have to know the explanation as to why God.
No, it doesn't. It presupposes.
No, it does because it does because I have to know the explanation as to why God brings about malaria.
I gave an argument for why there can't be an explanation, which you have not.
But that wasn't a good argument.
Well, okay, the fact that you don't think it's good is a psychological fact about you, but it's not an argument, okay? So the argument is the nature of a thing that's morally, of a bad thing that's morally, of a bad thing of a morally sufficient reason for its existence is that something bad is necessary for a greater good. However, if you're omnipotent, you don't need a bad thing for a greater good because you're omnipotent, so you can just bring about the greater good without needing the bad thing. Additionally, there's an inductive argument. Given the sheer scope of bad things in the world, it's extremely implausible that every single bad thing in the world has an explanation. You have no answer to either of those arguments. Nor have you given justification for why God needs glorification in the first place. Go ahead. You're muted. You're still muted. Now your camera's off and you're still muted.
All right, sorry about that. Okay.
All good.
Something. All right. Do you mind restating that?
Okay. So 1, the nature of morally sufficient reason for a bad thing is that something that's bad is necessary for some greater good. But if you're omnipotent, you don't need a bad thing for a greater good because you can already bring about the greater good. Also, wait, side point for the people who are watching the video, you should like the video right now. Do it. It's no cost to yourself, but it's good. Okay, anyways. So the nature of a morally sufficient reason for bad things is something bad is necessary for some greater good. Okay, but God's omnipotent, so He doesn't need a bad thing for a greater good. God can bring about the greater good without needing the bad thing for the greater good. Second, even if you think that it's logically possible that there's a morally sufficient reason for all the bad things in the world, there's a strong inductive case against that. Given the sheer number of the bad things in the world, it is extremely implausible that every single bad thing in the world has a morally sufficient reason. You appealed to God needing it to glorify himself, but you have not justified why God needs to glorify himself. And God can glorify himself without needing thousands of babies every single day to die of malaria.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, let me see how I can respond to that. Because there was so much at once, and so
there were 3 points.
Yeah, I know, but it was rattled off really quickly, and so to absorb all of it is
I've
a lot.
said all of them several times.
Yeah, and I appreciate you doing that. Okay, I think a simple explanation to that is it depends on God's reason for doing those things, and
Okay.
it doesn't matter whether or not a theist, because you're establishing why God doesn't exist. It doesn't matter whether or not a theist is able to give a good enough explanation as to why God is doing that thing. I've said that earlier. You have to establish that there is no explanation.
I did that.
No, you didn't do that.
I did.
You just said there could no. You just said that he couldn't do it because he couldn't do it, and I don't agree with that. It depends on why God is doing it.
I've explained.
It doesn't just depend on why God is doing it. It depends on
Films.
God's goal in doing so.
Faithandfilms. I've explained to you several times why there can be a morally sufficient reason. Okay, so
Okay, so we've already.
Can I explain? Okay, so the nature of a morally sufficient reason. When you say that there's a morally sufficient reason for something that's bad, you're saying that yes, this thing is bad, but it's necessary to do a thing that's good. So it's necessary for a greater good. God is omnipotent. He can, with his omnipotent wand, he can bring about the greater good without needing the bad thing because he's omnipotent. So there cannot be a morally sufficient reason. You have to answer that argument. It is not an answer to the argument to repeat that I have not given an argument when I just did.
I think a great analogy would be if the greatest good would be, let's say, eating ice cream, and then to say, well, why does he have to ordain people to eat ice cream if that's in order to accomplish that greater good? Well, the answer is embedded in the fact that that's the only way to eat ice cream. So he has to bring about people that eat it. So now when I say it depends on what the greatest good is, if we were talking about natural disasters or saving people from hospitals or curing malaria, then I agree with you. That would presuppose that he needed to do that and he just didn't have to create a place where there was malaria. But if the greatest good is something outside of external things, but it's something namely bringing God glory or whatever. So hold on one second. So the explanation is heavily dependent on what is the greatest good, and so I think the explanation is what is the greatest good, and if the greatest good is to bring God glory, then I think that's it's sufficient to cover all these other reasons.
So even if the greatest good,
I have no idea.
Okay,
I couldn't give you all the explanation.
Okay, so
as to why.
Okay, so the greatest good is to bring God glory. There are several issues with that account, but we can even grant it. Okay, so the greatest good is to bring God glory. Why does God need to be brought glory? Or sorry, wrong question. So
that's a separate question for sure. That's an unnecessary question. We're just talking about what the greatest good is.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Okay, I just want to explain it to people.
Right, no, I agree. Okay, so how does God get brought glory?
Do I have to explain that? I just gave you the explanation that the greatest.
No, what is the way that God gets brought glory?
Well, why is that necessary to answer that question?
Well, because
are you back to an inductive case here?
No, you have not addressed the inductive case either. But we're currently on the argument that I'm having against your position. Okay, so let's grant for a moment. Okay, let's grant that God's goal is to bring about glory. When a child dies of malaria, can they continue to bring God glory if they're dead? Yes or no?
Well, probably not in that
Okay, cool.
Not, not, no, I
Okay,
didn't say
great.
no. Hold on. So you have to let
Okay, you
me
said
say
probably not, but okay.
no, I didn't. I wasn't. No, didn't even say probably not. You
Okay,
cut me off before I
yes,
finished
yes or no?
talking. Well, it's not a yes or no answer. You can't
It is.
force me into it. Well, it's not. I mean, you
Well,
want that
no,
kind of answer, but it's
the
not.
answer
But
to the
it's
question is either a
probably
yes or a no. Or you could say
no,
probably
it's
yes or
not.
probably no. But okay.
No, it's not even that. So the answer is probably not in the same sense, but the child still brings God glory because life doesn't end. Either you will be sentenced to eternity in hell or you'll be sentenced to everlasting life with God. So the child never actually dies in the sense that you're thinking about it.
Okay. So do dead children
It still does bring God glory,
okay.
yes.
Okay, so do dead children bring God more or less glory than living children do?
They bring God glory in different senses.
But do they bring more or less glory?
God doesn't give me the quantitative means to determine that, but they bring God glory in different senses.
Okay, so if dead children bring God glory, and the morally good act is whichever brings God most glory, then it would be then it would be good for people to die. Now, if you say, which is a pretty rough bullet to bite. Now, if you say that living people bring God more glory, then you have no account of why God makes it so that thousands of children die of malaria every day. Yeah. Young's Baghdad. Yeah, it's not really clear why God would need glory.
All right, great. Okay, sorry about that. I thought someone was calling my name,
and
it sounded like it was going to be emergency, so I got up. So I apologize for that.
All good.
Okay. So okay, what was the question again?
Sorry. Okay, so the question was, so does God?
Wait. Before you ask the question again, because I tend to give responses, and you'll give a response that indicates that I didn't answer your question, but I did. So when I said that God did not he doesn't give us a quantitative means by which we determine whether or not it was determine which one brings him more glory. The answer that it gives him glory in different senses is a sufficient answer to that initial question. Do you agree?
Okay, so no. So do you think
why don't you agree?
So the claim that is glory a single thing that do things bring God different amounts of glory? Yes or no?
Sure.
Great. Okay.
I can't quantify that.
Right. Okay. So you can say that one of them, that either living or dead kids bring God more glory, but you don't know which one it is. That's fine. That's fine. No. But different senses. If they both bring God glory,
I don't know that. But here's the thing. I don't even know if they do. I don't know that they do.
So
I just know that they do in different senses.
If they both bring God glory, and one of them would have to bring God more glory.
No, that's not true.
Or they would have to bring God equal glory. That's how numbers work.
No, I don't accept that. You can have them bring glory in different senses. They don't have to outweigh one another, because that would assume. No. Wait a second. Hold on. For example, under the Christian perspective, I could say God is equally glorified in damning people as he is in saving people. But the way in which he's hold on one second. Because I'm not just talking to you, there are people watching. The way in which he's glorified is how much he's glorified. The way in which he's glorified is in different senses. God gets glory in damning and saving. Can I quantify which one brings him more glory? No, I cannot.
Okay, so the way numbers work is for one number relative to another, the number is either greater than, lesser than, or equal to the other number. Okay, so if both bring amounts,
and I just told you I can't quantify, so I don't know.
Okay, but this is a true trichotomy. Okay, it has to be either greater, lesser, or equal. No, you can say that you don't know which of those it is, right? Okay, he's gone. Well,
I'm here. I'm listening.
Okay, you can say that you don't know which of those three it is, but I can walk you through why whichever of the three it is, it's bad. But do you agree that it has to be one of the three, even if you don't know which of the three it is?
My explanation hasn't changed. I can't quantify it. So give me.
You not being able to quantify it is an epistemic problem. That is a problem with what you know. That does not describe the situation on the ground. Okay. So do you agree that it is either greater than, lesser than, or equal to? Do you agree that
Sure, I think it's a true trichotomy. Go ahead.
Great. Okay. So if it's great, so if God gets more glory from dead kids, we morally ought to maximize God's glory, then it would be morally good if kids die. God gets less glory, then it would be bad if kids die, and then God should not bring about malaria, which kills kids. And if it's equal, well, then it would be morally irrelevant if kids. Then there would be no difference. It would neither be good nor bad if kids die of malaria.
If it was indifferent, then okay. If you said if it was equal, then he would be indifferent.
Right. If you say
why does that follow?
Okay, so if you say that what we morally ought to do is what maximizes God's glory, and both states of the world bring about equal amounts of glory, then we should be indifferent between the two of them because they're equally good.
I'm tempted to say.
Do you agree that we should be indifferent between two things if they're equally good?
Not necessarily. It depends on what our mandate on earth is to do. In the ultimate scheme of God, in the ultimate scheme of things, God is glorified in both things happening. But from the ground, there are things that we're called to do. So
should we sometimes do things that decrease God's glory?
Well, I've already said that in the grand scheme of things, God is glorified in all things.
Okay, but so if God's glorified in all things, then why does anything we do matter? If he's equally glorified, what we morally ought, and then the only thing that matters morally is how glorified God is, but God's equally glorified in all states of the world. And that would just be moral skepticism. That would be nihilism about the action that you should take on earth.
No, it matters because there are different ways in which God is glorified. Everything is not the same. It's just, you're not choosing between vanilla and vanilla. I mean, it's just not the same.
Okay, so there may be different ways, but if all of them glorify him equally, and God, the only thing that matters morally is how glorified God is, then nothing matters. Nothing we do on earth would matter. It would be fine to kill babies. It would be fine to do whatever you want. My atheism glorifies God, if everything glorifies God equally, as much as your Christianity does.
In a different sense, sure.
Okay, so God is equally glorious regardless of what happens. The only thing that matters morally is how glorious God is. Therefore, morally, being a Christian, being a God-fearing Christian who is morally, who helps people out, is morally equal to being a serial killer. That's an entailment of your view.
No.
Which part of what I said do you disagree with?
Well, because God glorifies himself in the condemnation of wicked people. So
then if I'm a wicked person, that's fine because I'm condemned, right? And God glorifies himself in my condemnation.
The acts are still wicked. It doesn't make God. It doesn't mean that God is morally indifferent toward the acts.
Yeah, okay.
That's incorrect.
I know. Okay, but you.
But I'm saying in the grand scheme of things, he's ultimately glorified.
Okay,
that doesn't mean that God is that it's immoral.
No, I understand that. Okay, stop saying things. Okay, so I agree with that, right? But so is God's glory? It is equal regardless of what actions are taken. And you also said that the only thing that matters morally is how glorified God is, correct? Did you not say that?
I don't.
Just yes or no? All right, I guess the question was phrased confusingly. Okay. Yeah. Did you say that the only thing that matters morally is how glorified God is?
No, I didn't say that.
Okay, so what other things matter morally other than how glorified God is?
I said ultimately. I didn't say morally.
Okay, what other things matter morally other than how glorified God is?
Let me think of how to answer that question.
Wait, on your view, is morality agent relative?
What do you mean by that?
So, like, do the moral things that I ought to do differ from the moral things that you ought to do?
No, God has a prescriptive will, and then he has a decretive will.
Okay, so okay, okay. So then the first question still on the table, which is what things are morally relevant other than the glorification of God?
I would say that we obey God's commands.
Okay,
So
that's morally relevant. Can dead people obey God's commands?
I've already said that
Just yes or no.
under my position. Well, no, but it's
It
not really a
is.
good
It
question.
is a
No,
yes or
because
no question.
I've already said under my position, people live eternally. So it
Okay,
just says
but if people die in this life, then can they continue to obey God's commands if they're dead?
yeah, because I'm not a physicalist. They have a spirit that goes on to glorify God
Okay,
in
so do they
different
glorify?
senses.
So okay,
In
so
different senses. So
yeah,
I
no,
probably
I know. You said the different senses thing a bunch of times. Okay, so then the question is, do they glorify God more or less after they die?
say that one more time.
Do they glorify God more or less after they die, or the same amount?
I can't quantify that.
Okay, well, so again, so if you say that they glorify God more, then you would have to say that it's good for people to die, assuming. Sorry, that not that they glorify God more, but rather that they obey God's deeds more, right? So if you say that they,
Now, are
if you
you
say,
reading off something? Can you send that to me so I can think over?
I'm not reading off anything.
Oh, okay. Do you have typed out your
No.
conclusion that? Okay, so because I'm trying to follow everything and it's a little bit difficult for me.
So is there is there a morally relevant, like, so if I'm dead, do I obey God more or less than if I'm alive, or the same, or you don't know?
Um, yeah. Do you glorify him more or less if you're dead?
More or less, same, or you don't know?
Yeah, I think you glorify God in different ways.
More, less, same, or you don't know?
I think you glorify God in different ways.
That's not an answer. Okay, I know that it's in a different way, but like there are different flavors of ice cream, but there's still a flavor of ice cream that you like more, and a flavor of ice cream that you like less.
Yeah, I'd be
Pointing out
able
the
to
two ice cream
quantify
flavors,
that. I can't
pointing out,
quantify.
well, you
Yeah, I won't
can't
be able.
quantify it exactly. So you might say that you don't know if you prefer ice cream A or ice cream B, right? But there is a fact of the matter. So you can say you like it, much like in the ice cream flavor example. You can say you like it more, you like it less, so you like it equal, or you can say you don't know.
Yeah,
Those are the only
yeah, I
options. So
agree.
which of them do you say?
Well, I've already said I couldn't quantify.
Okay, so you don't know. Correct?
Okay. Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, so right, so then we can just walk through why none of those accounts work. So okay, so if you say that the things that matter morally, which are God, which are obeying God, and uh obeying God and glorifying God. If you say that those in conjunction are greater after death, then you would have to say that it's morally good when people die, because it is better when people die, because the two things that matter go up when people die. If you say that the conglomeration of things that matter decreases after people die, you'd have to explain why God makes it so that people die every day of painful diseases. And you can't appeal to glorification for the reasons that I explained before. If you say equal, then you would have to say that it's morally neutral to prevent people from dying. Okay, so it can't be any of the three. So you might not know which of the three it is, but none of the three work.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah. Um, hmm. Yeah, let me think about that. I think that probably when we say it's morally good when people die, that needs more nuance because it depends on which way we say Okay, so is death a result of so from a Christian perspective, death is an evil, but it's an evil that God brings about to establish a good. And so
Okay, but I explained before why
ultimately,
you can't appeal to bad things for a greater good. If you agree that death is by itself evil, can't appeal to it for a greater good. Because if you're omnipotent, you don't need the bad thing for a greater good, because you can bring about the greater good with the wave of your omnipotent wand.
No, I thought we already established it. It depends on what the greater good is. We've already.
It doesn't. Whatever it is, if you agree that death,
no,
actually,
it does.
is bad, then God cannot need it for a greater good. He's omnipotent, so he can bring about the greater good without needing the evil.
No, it depends on what the greater good is.
It does not.
Now, in this one conversation,
whatever the greater good is, if you grant the death is evil, you're omnipotent, you can bring about the greater good without needing the bad thing. You don't need the babies to die, because you can, with a wave of your omnipotent wand, you can bring about the good thing.
No, probably not within. I think probably not with in this one interaction am I going to be able to establish every all the reasons why it matters. But I gave an example.
I've given you an argument.
No, you didn't. No. You're asserting that, and you've given explanations. But within this one discussion, I'm not going to be able to go through all the reasons why. Depending on what the greater good is, it depends. It does matter what the greater good is, because the means by which you accomplish that greater good can only be. So, for example, if the greatest good is running, well, you can't accomplish that by sleeping. If the greatest good is watching television, you can't accomplish that without television.
If you're omnipotent, you don't need the bad things for the greater good. You can bring about the greater good, given that you're omnipotent, without needing the bad things. Unless you affirm there's some logical necessity for the bad things to happen.
It depends on what the greater good is.
It does not. It does not. I've explained why. It does not depend on what the greater good is.
I think that it does, but okay. So do you have another argument?
Well, okay, sure.
I think we're beating a dead horse.
I think
we're beating a dead horse. I don't think it's helpful to run around the same point.
That's fine. You've not given an objection to the argument I've given, but sure, we can move on to other arguments.
No, I haven't given an objection that you found sufficient.
No, you have not given an objection that I have not
found sufficient. Well, I agree that you responded to it, but I did give a response to what you said. So now, do you have a different argument?
Okay, sure. So, well, I don't think you've responded, but we can agree to disagree. So another argument would be that if you say that there's a morally sufficient reason for all the bad things in the world, such that the world is better as a result of those things existing, then you would have to say that that the world would be worse if the things that we commonly think of as bad went away. So you'd have to say that if there was no malaria, that would be a bad thing. If you went back in time and prevented malaria from ever existing, that would be a bad thing. So do you say that?
I thought we were moving on from this. We've discussed it.
I was giving you a separate objection to your response. A separate reason why there can't be a solution.
Yeah, let me think about that. Do you mind restating that?
Okay, so if you say that there's a morally sufficient reason for all of the bad things in the world, then you would have to say that we should not try to get rid of those things in the world, because overall they're ultimately good. The world is better as a result of their existence, such that it would be bad if they had never existed.
No, you're equivocating on the sense better. I mean, you can't equivocate. I mean, this is why. Yeah. Well, hold on. I'm going to explain it. Hold on. I'm going to explain. Yeah, hold on. I'm going to explain it.
What definitions am I equivocating on?
I know, but as I'm going to explain it, you're kind of cutting me off as I'm doing that. It's better. So for example, under my position, and I think that's what you're criticizing. When I say it's better, I don't mean in the same sense. And so,
Faith and Films, give me definitions that I'm equivocating on. Because equivocation is saying that you're using one definition in one sense, another definition in another sense. So what are the definitions that I'm equivocating on?
Yeah.
Note, the answer to this question should be to give two definitions that I'm allegedly equivocating on, not to say other things.
Yeah, I think when we say better in one sense, and then you use the same better in another sense, I think that we are. Let me 1 second.
The answer should be two definitions.
No, I don't think I have to give that kind of explanation, but I'm glad that you're.
Okay, so the word equivocation means you're using one definition in one premise.
Oh, sorry, not equivocating. I apologize. You're conflating, right? So you're conflating two contexts in which a person says better. So there is there is a sense in which I would say it's better, and there's another sense in which I would say it's not. So restate your argument, and I'll point it out to you.
You accused me of equivocation.
I've already said that I misspoke. Misspoke. I used the wrong word. I meant to say you conflated. You conflated two contexts.
What concept am I
conflating? Two senses of better used in different contexts.
Yeah, which sense? What's the difference?
Restate your argument, and I'll restate
so
your
argument. So if you say that the world is better as a result of malaria existing, such that it's good that God made malaria, then you would have to say it would be bad to try to get rid of malaria if malaria is ultimately a good thing. It would certainly be bad to go back in time and make it so that malaria had never existed.
Yeah, it's just so. Yeah, I'm trying to think about how to respond to this here. The world is, yeah.
I mean, if you don't have an objection to any of my two objections to the morally sufficient reason explanation, we can move on.
No, it's not that I don't have an objection. I'm trying to type out my objection because it's harder for me to respond to that on the fly. So I'm trying to figure out the way that I want to reply to that. So I do have an objection, and so I think that it would be better, yeah, because that wouldn't be my theology to say that it is better for malaria to exist than not to exist. Okay, I would say it's better in the sense, let me think. It's better in one way, and in another it's not.
What are the different ways?
Yeah, so in one way it's not better because God doesn't desire for there to be evil. It ultimately goes against God's character for there to be evil. But in one sense, it is better for there to be malaria because it demonstrates God's plan in creation, or it demonstrates what God is working out in creation.
So those are just different mechanisms by which it's better. So in one way, there's one mechanism by which it's good, another mechanism by which it's bad. Is it overall good or bad?
No, I'm uncomfortable saying no because when I communicate it's better, I want to clarify what sense it's better.
It's better in the two things you've given are better in the same sense. They're just different mechanisms. So one mechanism is a causal way that it's better. Another one is a causal way that it is worse. Okay. So it's not different senses of better. It's just different like signs. Like in one way it's good, in another way it's bad.
Yeah.
But overall,
Right,
you're good at that. So if you say that every bad thing in the world, everything that we commonly think of as bad, God has a sufficient reason for it, such that the world is better as a result of those things existing, then it would follow from that it would be morally bad to try to get rid of God's creations that God has a morally sufficient reason for. It would be bad to get rid of malaria. It would be bad to get rid of flesh-eating parasites. And yet that's not a conclusion that you would accept.
No, I don't accept that conclusion because it depends on what the goal is. Better at what? The question has to be, what is it better at?
Better overall.
Overall in what in accomplishing what?
Sense.
In accomplishing what?
In a moral
You can't
sense.
just say it's better at accomplishing
what. You're a moral
what?
realist. You think that there are things
better at accomplishing what? That's the question.
No, you're a moral realist. You think that there are some things that are objectively better than other things. You would say that it's objectively better if I don't murder people than it is if I do murder people.
Ultimately,
So is the world? Is it objectively? Is it objectively?
No,
wait.
There is a sense in which it is wrong.
Wait,
there is a sense in which it's wrong. So it depends on what that thing is accomplishing.
Not different senses. It's just there's a way that it's good.
It depends on what that thing is. No, I don't agree with that. It depends on what that thing is accomplishing. It depends on what that thing is accomplishing. You can't have something better. Better at accomplishing what? What is it better at accomplishing? So you're not going to straw man my theology. You're not going to straw man my theology and make me hold to something I do not hold. It's better at accomplishing something. So I think we're at an impasse. I think you should bring up another argument.
Okay, that's fine.
Because it's better at accomplishing a particular goal.
You're a moral realist. You think that there are some things that are better, all things considered, than other things.
Irrelevant.
You think that it's better. You think that it's better if I don't kill people than it is if I do people. Not better in a specific sense. Better overall.
You should bring up a different argument. We're at an impasse here.
Okay, that's fine. You don't have a response, but we can move on. What's your objection to the problem hiddenness?
That's not fair to do that after I just responded to you. But go ahead.
You did not respond.
So explain to me divine hiddenness.
God wants everybody to have a connection with him so he can glorify himself. Why does he not reveal himself to more people? Why does he not reveal himself to everyone? Why does God make it so that the only way that we can conclude that he exists is on the basis of fairly crappy arguments like the Kalam or the transcendental argument for God? Like if you were a god and you wanted your subjects to have a relationship with you, you would make it so that the evidence for you was pretty damn convincing.
Well, I just deny that that's a problem.
Okay, do you deny that there's not sufficient evidence that convinces that God could make his existence?
I do deny that. I do deny that.
You don't think God could make his existence more obvious?
No, I deny the fact that there are people who don't know God. Okay. No. I'm responding to the heart of what you said. I do believe that you know God because you're created in the image of God and you're reflecting your creator, whether or not you acknowledge him or not. So I deny that it's a problem.
Faithandfilms. So, okay. Do you think that I am consciously aware that God exists?
Well, the Bible teaches you're suppressing the truth and unrighteousness.
Yes,
you do know God. You know your creator. Yes, you do.
I do not.
I mean, because all the facts that you're acquainted with do necessitate reference to God.
Okay, so they don't, but okay. But do you think that so do you think that I'm lying about not knowing God?
Well, I think actually well, so let me say you're suppressing the truth and righteousness.
But it's a yes or no question.
I don't like to say. I'd like to say you're deceived and self-deceived.
Okay, but am I lying? Yes or no?
You're deceived and self-deceived.
Am I yes? It's a yes or no question.
You're self-deceived. Okay, I don't like that. I'm not going to use the word lying.
So that's neither a yes or nor a
No,
no.
it's not, because I'm not going to use that
Okay,
word.
so do you deny the law of the excluded middle? Because that's a basic tenet of logic. So am I lying?
No,
Yes or no?
no, I'm not going to use the word lying, and you're not going to trap me in that either.
Okay, it's a yes or no question. Don't dodge.
No, I'm not dodging.
Okay.
I'm not going to answer I'm not going to answer it in that way.
Do you know what we call it when you don't answer questions? We call it dodging.
Yeah,
Call it dodging.
Yeah, I guess.
Okay,
I guess you
fine.
can call me dodging. I'm not bothered by that.
Well,
but the point is the point that I was making is clear.
Okay. So if your claim is that I actually know that God exists, and you're just
God has made it
because I don't know
clear.
God.
Well, God, no, because so really the Christian perspective
God's made it
is
so
that
clear
there is no
that
such
be able
thing.
to provide better arguments than the ones that you're providing.
There is no such thing. Well, first off, I haven't argued for the existence of God yet, so that's a ridiculous. So that's a ridiculous statement. That's a ridiculous.
You can justify why your view is any more plausible than deism.
Again, that's a ridiculous statement to make because I never attempted to argue for the existence of God. However, all the facts that one is acquainted with, whether it be the sun, the moon, the stars, headphones, phone, would all be evidence for God. Why? Even your own Constitution, because God is the creator of those things.
How do you know?
And they themselves are calling. So now you're asking me a second question. The first question was, what's my response? No, okay, but don't ask a second question while I'm in the middle of answering your first question.
You answer the first one.
Your first objection. Hold on one second. Hold on. Your first objection was that there was divine hiddenness. I said there's no such thing. You are aware of your creator.
So I know.
Now establish that there are people that don't know God. If you're going to object to my argument, you're going to have to establish that.
So I've thought about it. I do not believe that God exists. So I'm either, and you can't be mistaken about your beliefs. You either, because if you're mistaken,
oh no, but a person can. Well, but just because you profess that you don't believe in God doesn't mean that you don't. I've talked to many atheists who have said, when you talk to them privately, they say, I do believe in God. That's not every atheist that I've talked to, but I've talked to atheists who have said that.
Okay, so
by name you're an atheist, but you haven't established that you don't believe in God. You just said that you don't. Hold on one second. No, wait a second. Hold on.
I obviously cannot establish the contents of my mind.
No, you can't.
However, your view would entail that your view would entail that every single atheist who professes to be an atheist,
that's correct, because they're fallen, they're sons of Adam. They have an Adamic nature,
right? So
they suppress your very nature is to suppress your creator. So you ask, so whether or not you think, whether or not you agree with what I'm saying is totally different than did I answer your question? I've already responded to the objection of divine hiddenness. This has been the weakest argument you brought up so far. This is the very weakest. This is the worst argument.
Yes. Okay. So faith in films. So do you agree that I know you think that I know deep down that God exists, but if it is the case that
are you asking for a Christian explanation of the of divine hiddenness?
Well, you haven't.
You said, why wouldn't God make it more clear? I said, he's made it abundantly clear. That's what Romans 1:18-25 says.
Let me ask the question, okay? So the question is, so let's say, I know you don't think this is the case, but let's say deep down, I don't know that God exists, okay? If that is the case, if I'm telling the truth about that, should I conclude that you're wrong? Because your view would entail that I do know deep down. So if I don't know deep down, then would your view be false? Yes or no? Yes
would my view that everyone knows God exists would be false? Well, yeah. If you didn't know, then great. I mean, it's a pretty straightforward answer. Okay.
Deep down, I do. It is not the case that I know that God exists.
Yeah, I get that. You've said that. You've said that several times now.
Right.
But I just gave you the Christian explanation.
What incentive would I have to lie about the existence of God such that I know that I'll burn forever? What incentive would other religious people have to pray to a different God that they know does not exist and know that they'll get burned forever for it and spend more time practicing their religion that is false than even you do for your religion that's allegedly true?
Why do people murder when they know they'll get a lifetime in jail or even the death penalty?
Well,
because they're irrational. They're irrational.
Okay,
So you're looking for a
your claim is
rational
that every
explanation.
single- your
Wait,
claim is that
stop,
every
stop,
single
stop, stop,
atheist-
stop.
Your
See, you
claim,
do
your
this.
claim,
Hold
your
on
claim,
one
your claim,
second. See, hold on.
your claim.
You do
Okay,
this
no,
every time. You don't
no,
let a person, you don't let
you
a person
filibuster.
extrapolate on their answer. No, I'm not filibustering.
You are
You're
filibustering.
not letting me extrapolate on my answer, so
No.
it looks like you're
So I'm
giving a
asking you.
sufficient rebuttal. You haven't given a single
I'm,
you haven't
I'm,
given a sufficient
I'm,
rebuttal to
I'm,
anything I've
I'm,
said this entire
I
discussion.
absolutely have given a sufficient rebuttal. Okay, so rather than filibustering, okay, so what? But I mean, so is your claim is that
all I just said, there doesn't have to be a rational reason for an irrational act.
okay, so
But
every
is that
atheist
correct? Well, hold on one
is
second. Do you
irrational
accept that
and
answer?
knows.
Hold on, no.
So
Do you accept that answer? There
I
does
do.
not have
I
to
do
be a
accept.
rational answer for it
Yes,
because
I
people are
do. I do
irrational.
accept
Okay,
that. I
great.
do.
That's my explanation to your
Okay,
question. That's my
so-
answer to your
okay.
question.
However, so then it has to be the case that every single non-Christian,
Yes.
they're all being
Yes.
irrational.
The
Okay.
very nature of a fallen
most
person
people-
is self-frustration.
I think that it
You
is-
frustrate.
I think
why is it? Hold on. Why is it that Satan tries to thwart the will of God and he knows that ultimately he cannot? He's ultimately irrational. So that's the explanation.
Well,
so you don't have to buy it, but that's the explanation, and it's a sufficient explanation to the question. God has made it abundantly clear to you that he's created you. He's made it abundantly clear through the fact that I'm preaching even the gospel to you now. That's God's extension to you and to anyone who's listening. So the fact is, well, why is God giving us credit? No, God is giving you your own thinking. I mean, it's impossible for a person to walk around, feel around without acknowledging their creator. Now that doesn't mean at every instant you're acknowledging your creator.
It's absolutely not true. I walk around. I do not think that God is.
And that you've just misrepresented what I said literally 2 seconds after I said it. I literally just said, not in every instance do you acknowledge God.
No instance
but in your own thinking, in your deepest thoughts, you do know God. But see, but I've given an answer to the question.
Bullshit armchair psychology about billions of people that you have no way to justify. But I mean, much like I mean,
is it an answer to your question or not?
So it's,
you're not satisfied? It's an answer to your question. Is it no? Hold on. Let's not move. Is it an answer to your question?
It is an answer to my question.
Okay,
it's not a very satisfactory answer.
It doesn't have to be satisfactory. I didn't ask for you to be satisfied, but I'm giving you a sufficient explanation. Is it okay? Great. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Okay, we can move on
because this is what you'll do. You'll throw out 15 different arguments. And then when there's a rebuttal, you'll say it's not satisfactory.
Stop filibustering, please. Okay, we can move on to another point. Okay, given that this is not falsifiable. Okay, so my next point would be, so why does the Bible write so many horrible things? Why does the Bible, for example, sanction beating the crap out of a slave as long as they get up after 3 days?
Because God found it just.
What do you think that it's just to beat the crap out of a slave as long as they get up after 2.5 days?
If God decreed it, it was good.
Okay, so you're fine with beating a slave as long as they get up after 2.5 days, given that God
in the context in which God,
right.
if God commands it, then it's good. Yes.
Okay, so do you think that anyone who blasphemes the name of the Lord is to be put to death in the entire assembly and stone them?
You did this when you were talking to Matt. It's like different covenant, but sure. They should. The Bible said yes. It is.
Do you think that it was permissible? And in Numbers, God said, "Now therefore, kill every male among the little ones, and kill every woman who has known man intimately, but all the girls who have not known man intimately, spare for yourselves."
Yes.
Okay. Do you think that it was okay for God to harm Job for literally no reason, as God admits to Satan?
He
says
that's a wrong account. That's a wrong account of Job.
He says, quote, he says, "There is no one like him on earth, a blameless and upright man who fears God and turns away from evil. He still persists in his integrity, although you incited me to turn against him for no reason." He admits he has no reason. Do you think that it's okay, that was okay?
Now, who makes that claim? Was that God?
Yes, that was God. Quote, "The Lord said to Satan, have you considered my servant Job? There's no one like him on earth, a blameless and upright man who fears God and turns away from evil. He still persists in his integrity, although you incited me against him to destroy him for no reason."
No, when God says that
That is
he
a direct
destroyed it, well, there's context. When God says he destroyed him for no reason, what he's communicating to Satan, just from hearing it, because I haven't actually studied the context there. So what I can think of is God is probably communicating to Satan that Satan was wrong in his accusations against Job. They were baseless claims,
God.
and so the
No,
Lord
God is talking about
vindicates that.
why God harmed Job and
No,
admits it
that,
for
that
no reason.
all right. Let me
But we
answer your
can,
question. Yes, it was justified.
okay,
Okay.
sure. Is it justified when in Hosea,
Yes,
God
it's
in
justified.
okay, so wait, but let's read the quote. He says, "You shall acknowledge no God but me. You are destroyed, Israel. The people of Samaria must bear their guilt, because they have rebelled against their God. They will
Mhm.
fall by the sword. Their little ones will be dashed to the ground. Their pregnant women ripped open." You're okay
Yeah,
with
that's a direct
okay?
result of their sin. Yes, it was just.
Okay, so
Yeah, it
you're
was.
okay.
It,
Okay,
it,
so
it was.
you're okay. So
It
you're
was.
okay with
It was.
dashing infants.
It
You're okay
wasn't.
with dashing
But
infants to the
see,
ground.
this
You're
is
okay
the
with killing
problem
infants.
when you rapid fire off these verses, you don't allow a person to give an adequate
Okay, give an
response.
account. An account.
God is not satisfied in the death of the wicked, but rather that they should turn from their evil ways and live. You
God
also leave out.
endorses
Hold on one
killing
second.
the
You
infants.
well, 1 second. You also leave out the fact that God has pleaded with this nation for hundreds of years.
Okay, and then he
You
endorses
don't
killing the
leave
infants.
out the fact that the Lord grieves over the fact that these people are being
Okay, God grieves
murdered.
about it,
But
and then he sanctions dashing the
ultimately,
infants to pieces.
the action is just.
Okay.
Yes.
Last quote.
But there needs to be an adequate response
Okay,
because if I no,
well,
hold on one second, hold on. This is important because as a theist, if I just say yes, God killed millions of children, so what? With that kind of cavalier attitude, that would be inappropriate to talk about the situation that way. And so when I say give me more time to explain, I mean it really makes so really what you're doing is you're not actually arguing against the existence of God as you were doing earlier. Now you're simply trying to make the theist look like he's a villain by affirming those things
well, no,
because
I'm trying,
you don't
no,
know you're
I'm
not
trying to
allowing for
argue
a full
your,
then allow
no,
for a full context.
I'm trying to,
Allow for a person to give a full
I'm trying
explanation.
to argue that your view has absurd entailments. But okay,
But you
have
haven't
fun.
justified that. You haven't
I
justified that. You've just simply asserted that. Now, I'd like to hear an argument for that, but you're not
okay,
going to be
well,
able to give an argument for that. But maybe we can do another discussion on that.
I think most reasonable people recognize that you should not dash infants to pieces.
But why is that wrong under your view?
Well, okay, because I think suffering is bad, and
Why
one
is
thing that
suffering
causes
bad? So what? What
no,
happens to the person that disagrees with you?
well, I don't think there's a deeper account. Suffering just is bad.
Why is it?
It
Why?
just is.
You just
It
assume
just
that
is.
it is, or you just take it for granted?
I can give arguments for
Oh,
why I
okay,
think it
okay.
is.
So God does
There's
what
no
he does.
deeper
He
account of
just
why it
does.
is.
Okay, God just does. No deeper account. He just does.
Okay,
I'll give the
well,
same piss
right,
poor answer you just gave me.
okay,
Yeah,
well, but
I'll just
no,
give
no,
the
no.
same piss poor answer you gave me.
So much like if I ask you who created God, you say no one created God. God just is. Similarly, I would say that why are things good? They just are. Now I can give you arguments for how I know that they are good, but
You haven't justified it. You haven't justified it. You've just
well,
asserted it.
I am happy to justify.
And then my question was, what do you do when a person disagrees with that? Why are
Well,
they wrong? Why ought they be held to your moral convictions?
Because I'm right. Because I'm right.
How did you establish that?
Well, I was planning on giving arguments, but you cut me
Oh,
off
well, go
to
ahead.
accuse me of not giving
Well,
arguments.
let me hear the argument.
Okay, so the first one argument would be the argument from phenomenal introspection. Premise one: phenomenal introspection is generally
Break down the words.
Okay, phenomenal introspection involves thinking about our experiences and considering what they're like. So, for example, when I'm hungry, when I eat food, I think about what it's like, and I think, okay, I did the food taste sweet. I like, I just think about the aspects of my experience. My judgments that I form through phenomenal introspection are generally fairly reliable. They're
How do
regarded
you know
as
that? How do you know that?
well, they're regarded as reliable.
In what sense do you mean they're reliable? When you say
They
they're
are
reliable, are you saying they're
they
reliable
are
at 1 second? When you say they're reliable, are you saying they're reliable in that they produce the same result, or they're reliable in that you can trust that they're accurate results? Which sense of the word are you
three
using?
questions. In terms of the first one, by reliable, I mean truth tracking. In terms of the second one,
One more time, I didn't hear that.
Truth checking. They identify true things about the world. In terms of how I know that they're reliable, they're consistently regarded as reliable by psychologists and by evolutionary biologists.
Is a conclusion ever necessitated by a majority?
No, but the fact that it's accepted, that it's a mainstream view in science, is evidence for the conclusion.
So is that argumentum ad populum or no?
No, well, it's an inductive argument. Like, much like I could not give you an account. Like, I don't know exactly how we know.
I didn't hear you. Was it an appeal to a majority or not?
No, it wasn't. It was not.
So what was it an appeal to?
It was an appeal to the scientific consensus.
Okay, is that a non sequitur? I mean, does it follow that because there's
not a non sequitur?
No, does it follow that because there's a scientific consensus, therefore the scientific consensus is right?
No, the scientific consensus is not always right.
Let me say that one more time. So are you?
It doesn't follow from it, but it's evidence for it.
Okay, it doesn't follow that. Okay, good. Okay.
The conclusion.
Evidence for what? What is it evidence for?
So the scientific consensus is usually, but not always, right.
So is it arbitrary?
What?
Yeah. So if there's a scientific, okay. If there's a scientific,
what do you mean by arbitrary?
Okay, 1 second.
Just what do you mean by arbitrary?
Without basis.
I don't think it's random.
Okay.
So based on the scientific consensus, which I think we have decisive reason to think it's correct, given that the scientists who have looked at it and have studied it are more likely to come to conclusions than laymen who have not looked at it and have not studied it.
All right, great. So if the scientific consensus changes, then your moral standard changes.
Well, this
argument, all conclusions in science are tentative and subject to change upon further inspection.
Right. Yeah. So if the scientific consensus changed such that the tide turned, such that most scientists concluded that phenomenal introspection was not a reliable way of forming
so you're just appealing to the majority of scientists. Why ought we believe the majority of them? I mean, what's the argument that they're right?
Because scientists have studied the issue, and they've studied it very carefully and performed.
Okay, first off, okay. Hold on. Let me respond to that. Okay, first off, there's no consensus among scientists on any moral claim. That's ridiculous to even suggest.
I didn't make the claim there was. I made a claim that there was a consensus among scientists.
But there is no consensus. So you're appealing to something that doesn't even exist. Secondly, it doesn't follow from the fact. Secondly, it doesn't follow from the fact that there's a scientific. I want to respond. Hold on.
No, but you can't. Don't lay out 3 responses. Okay, lay out 1 response, and then I'll respond to that 1 response.
No. You didn't do that. You just shotgun spit. I mean, you just kind of threw them out. 15 different arguments in 5 seconds. Well, so no, I have a couple questions.
Okay, maybe I did, and then I'm sorry if you're doing that, but that's not a justification for you doing it. Okay, so in terms of the first point, I'm not making a claim that there's a scientific consensus about which moral view is correct. My claim was merely that there is a scientific consensus that phenomenal
scientific consensus about what? Okay, so second thing is we've already established. Second thing we've already established is it does not follow from the fact that there's a scientific consensus that therefore they're right. Evidence for what? No, it's not. It's not evidence for anything. It's a non sequitur. Okay,
it's not a non sequitur.
But now you have to establish why that view is right, and it doesn't help to just say it doesn't. No, you didn't. No, yeah. All right, you're giving me right now really BC answers.
Because the scientific consensus, so the scientists who form the scientific consensus have studied it long and hard. Thus, the conclusion.
Stop. Hold on. No. Because a person studies an issue long and hard, therefore they're right.
Doesn't mean they're always right, but it means that they're more likely to be right than the average layperson. That doesn't even follow. Right.
That doesn't even follow from that.
So if you think that the world has facts that we can ascertain through careful reflection, which you do, and as a basic tenet of knowledge, then you would say that the people who
that's irrelevant. Whether or not I accept the fact. Whether or not I accept the fact that there are facts that we can ascertain through introspection does not mean that I accept the fact that most of the time people are rational, or most of the time people get the right conclusion. You're asking me to accept that, but I'm not accepting that. So go ahead and lay out. Go ahead and lay out your argument.
I just did several times. I mean, we can move on.
Yeah, and the reason that I'm responding like this is because you machine gun. Okay, Well, go ahead and move on because I.
Yeah. Okay, so what's your positive argument for God?
I like that we moved from asking you questions about justifying morality or giving a justification for.
Well, I gave it, and you were not tracking. So, what's your positive argument for God?
Well, what things do you think I didn't track? Well, because
Well,
that's a big claim. What didn't I track well?
I don't think that you were tracking the argument for phenomenal introspection. But I mean, that was just a long rabbit hole about one specific argument for utilitarianism. But I don't have to justify utilitarianism, because this debate that we're having.
I just said what you're switching the topic. What part didn't I track well?
Well, you did not accurately, like, adequately respond to the arguments that I gave for why suffering is bad.
Which argument? Okay, which argument didn't I adequately
phenomenal introspection argument that we were just on? But
which
it's
one?
Not,
you said the arguments, that implies there were multiple.
Yeah, so the argument I made for the scientific consensus. But it's not even.
Do you want to lay it out again? So then I will mute. I'll give you 5 minutes to justify that, and then we can go through it.
Faithandfilms. That's fine. We can move on to a different point, okay? Because that was just one massive rabbit hole. That one specific argument for my moral system.
But I'm kind of interested in. I would like to stay there because you made the claim that I wasn't tracking, and there's been no evidence of that at all, that I have not been tracking. But now we can move on now that you've said that.
Okay, we can leave it to the audience to decide if you're tracking. Okay, so what's your positive argument for God?
Well, I stated it earlier. Now we've been talking for an hour, 44 minutes and 39 seconds. I think we'll probably need more. We'll probably need a separate discussion for me to do that. I came in here to answer questions about theism, generally, the problem of evil, divine hiddenness, so forth.
So you're not willing to lay out your positive case for God?
Well, I gave you my general case for the existence of God, namely the truth of Christianity from the impossibility of the contrary, from the fact that you're not going to have human intelligibility apart from the Christian God. And you didn't give me much of a response to that, other than saying, well, there's potentially another worldview, by which we can do
What things are unintelligible without God? What things are unintelligible without God?
Well, I only said that I was going to give a general case. I'm not going to explain. Well, I already brought up the fact that epistemology, metaphysics, axiology, those things would not, you would not be able to justify that. And then I brought up empiricism earlier.
Yeah, no, you said a bunch of assertions.
I went through individual arguments earlier. I brought up empiricism.
How do you justify empiricism, for example, on your view?
Well, I'm not an empiricist. Empiricism is self-refuting.
So give me one example of the thing that I allegedly can't justify, and explain how you justify it.
Well, first off, empiricism on its face is
I'm not an empiricist, and that's not an answer to the question. I can repeat the question. The question is...
Wait, what was your question?
Give an account of something that I allegedly can't justify, and then explain how you justify it.
You didn't say that initially. You said...
I said that verbatim.
No, you didn't. No, you said, give me something that empiricism can't justify.
No.
You did say that, okay. But that's fine. You can move on from that.
Okay, so I mean... I don't think I did. If I did, I misspoke. Okay, so what is something that I can't justify that you can justify? And explain how you justify.
Well, we tried to go through your moral argument earlier, and you gave up on that. Okay, so would you like to give me your epistemology?
Answer the question.
You're going to have to give me your worldview for me to do that. I'm not going to just go through 50 different worldviews at once. You're going to have to give me one worldview.
What element of my worldview are you curious about?
Well, we went through your theory of ethics, to which you didn't want to continue to talk about.
So how do you justify morality?
Well, let me ask the second. Let me answer the second question. Don't ask a question.
Answer mine.
Well, no, I want to hear your epistemology. I'm more interested in that. We had a conversation where you grilled me for an hour, so I'd like to have some answers from an atheist. I mean, it's only fair that after an hour that you should be able to be willing to respond to some questions, right?
You've asked me questions, but wait, just answer this one, and then you
Wait.
can
We spoke.
answer mine,
I mean,
answer
you
mine,
grilled me
answer
for an
mine, and I'll answer
hour.
yours. Answer
Well,
mine, and I'll answer yours.
you grilled me for over an hour and 20 something minutes, and now that I have questions for you, you think that because you answered one question that is
I've answered a
satisfactory, or
series of
that's
questions. Answer my question.
okay.
Just answer this one.
But you don't
Wait,
want to go through an
Faith,
hour.
Faith and Films. Answer my question, and I'll answer just this one, and then I'll answer yours. Okay? I'll answer all the questions you want. Okay? So, how do you ground morality?
Well, the thing is, if I were to answer that question after a slew of machine
You're
gun
not willing.
questions for over an hour, that
You're not
wouldn't be
willing.
fair to the.
You're
That
not.
wouldn't.
You're
I'm
not
not
willing.
willing. But the
Okay.
reason I'm not willing is
That's
because
fine.
you
You can
machine
dodge a
gun
question.
questions.
Ask me whatever question you want. Unlike you, I actually answered the question.
Well, we. Okay. So anyway, what's your epistemology?
What elements of my epistemology are you not sure about? Because there are a lot of elements of my epistemology.
Well, I think the question generally explain to me what your epistemology is.
What do you mean by that? What about my epistemology do you want to know?
Do you hold revelatory epistemology?
No.
Okay, what kind of epistemology do you hold?
So there are certain axioms that I hold, and then I build up from there.
What are axioms?
Things that we accept without being able to justify them.
How do you start arguing without a basis, and then you conclude anything without a basis?
Well, I think I have a basis, but my basis is just built on the axioms that I accept. I mean, do you think that you can justify axioms? Because
that's the very definition of an axiom. It's an unjustified principle.
Right. I mean, do you
just have glorified axioms at the end of your argument? I mean,
right. But there are certain very high criterion I have for axioms. So one criterion would be, I think it has to be something that basically everyone, after careful reflection, or even not that careful, basically everyone after reflection would accept.
All right. So you believe the world is knowable?
Yes, I think so.
Now, how do you know the world is knowable outside of your own experience of the world?
Well, because I experience the world and then I figure things out about it.
Okay, let me ask the question again. I don't think I got an answer. How do you know the world is knowable outside your experience of the world?
I don't. I know it's knowable from my experience of it.
Okay, so then how do you know that the world is how you perceive it to be?
I don't. It could be different, but if it's
how do you have knowledge? How do you know things then? Isn't knowledge justify true belief?
Yeah, I think we can make probabilistic claims.
But you don't think you can have justified true belief? Excuse me.
I think, well, it would depend on what you mean by justified. I think that I can have beliefs that are, I think that they're justified in that they're the most likely to be true, but I don't think that I can know that they're true with certainty. Do you hold that you can have certain knowledge?
Can you say that one more time?
Do you hold that you can have certain knowledge?
Before that.
I hold that there are certain views that I can accept with high probability, but I don't think that there's anything that I know with certainty.
All right, first problem.
Except perhaps the fact that I'm conscious.
I got it. Okay, the first problem is you're not going to be able to have it. You're not going to be able to make a probabilistic assessment without an appeal to the whole, to which you've admitted to not even knowing the whole. So how could you determine what's more likely to be the case than not?
Well, I think that one of the axioms that I accept is that there is an external world.
Now, do you think that was I don't want to be obnoxious here, so I apologize for laughing. But do you think that was an answer to my question?
Repeat the question.
My question was, and I'm forgetting how I worded it, which is so bad. So my initial question was, how do you know the world? I mentioned the fact that probabilistic assessments cannot be made without appeal to the whole, to which you already admitted or that you don't know the whole. So how are you able to make probabilistic assessments without referencing the whole, which is external reality? How are you able to do
Wait,
that?
why do I need to? What do you mean by referencing the whole?
Well, in order to make a probability, or in order to
Oh, wait,
say
just what?
I have
Well,
1/4 or
just what do you
2/3,
mean
or
by the whole?
well, so I should probably say the noumena, the world that lies outside of your experience. So how are you able to justify when you say I'm probably right? Well, what are you using to reference that? Your own
Oh,
experiences?
well, yeah, I am, but it would be very surprising if if there is an external world, which I take as an axiom, it'd be very surprising if my experience consistently, followed predictable patterns and
What do you mean
was
by surprising?
unlikely.
How do you're repeating the same claim now? How do you
Yeah,
know it's unlikely? You don't
so
have reference.
well,
You how do you reference the
because
world outside of your experience?
there are a variety of outcomes and only of possible outcomes. If
Okay,
there
give me the outcomes
So,
right now.
like for example, so if I were being, if there was an external, if I were just a crazy person who had all these hallucinations, well, then it is unlikely that those hallucinations would correspond to a consistent reality, because it could be the case that they correspond, they just result in these wide inconsistencies. The fact that they don't result in these wide inconsistencies vindicates me in my view.
Let me think about that. You said, well, how would you know? Okay, so let me say let's say if I granted that, how would you distinguish between a how would you distinguish between a world of um, illusory physicality versus a world of genuine physicality, where
What do you
things are
mean?
actually a world
What
where
do you
things are actually physical versus illusions of a world being physical.
Well, I mean, I take it as an look, I take it as an axiom
So
that
you
there's
don't know. Just say you don't know. That's akin to saying I can't know that.
I don't think it is. I mean, do you have the view that you can just have knowledge without axiom? Yes or no? Because if so, I would be very curious as to how you get your beliefs from first principles.
What do you mean by first principles?
Like how you get it with no axiom.
Without principles that are unjustified?
Yes.
Okay, so before I answer that question, you're saying you have no justification for thinking that the world outside of your experience is real, and that
Well,
the world is not, and that the world is
I,
not being
I,
shaped by your experiences.
I think I do from within the axioms that I accept. I don't think I can justify those axioms, and I don't
Well,
think
I'm
you
not
can
saying that
either.
you don't have a
You
confidence
can't.
level of those
Yeah,
things, but I'm saying how do you
wait,
justify that? Now, whether or not I can justify it is totally irrelevant as to whether or
wait,
not
sure.
you can.
I'll agree. I'll agree that I cannot justify it absent my axioms, which I accept without
So how
justification.
would you object to anything being true or false,
Well, within the
right or
axioms I
wrong?
accept. How? But look, I mean,
You're just giving me
this
from
is
your
look.
perspective.
I can give you a proof. Okay, that this problem will afflict any view. Okay, are you familiar with the Munchausen trilemma?
Not by the way. Yes, I'm familiar with it, but not the way you said it. I was a little thrown off by it. I think it's the Munchausen's trilemma. Is
Yeah,
that
it's
how you
also
say it?
called Agrippa's trilemma. Okay, so
Not
how? I
familiar.
mean, okay, so how do you get all your beliefs from first principles? Or sorry, not from first principles. Like how do you ground everything without needing to have certain unjustified stipulations?
Well, one, God creates God creates
How do you know that?
uh, because God created.
But how do you know that?
Because God created.
But how do you know that?
God's communicated that He's done that.
How do you know that?
Because God's speech is self-authenticating.
How do you know that his speech is self-authenticated?
It's the nature of something being self-authenticating. It's self-authenticating.
Well, I can just say my axioms are self-authenticating.
You could say that, but then you would be contradicting your definition of axiom.
Okay.
You'd be switching the
Sure.
definition.
Sure.
There.
So, okay, they're not axioms. They're self-authenticating.
1 second. Someone says, "Why are you debating Marquez Brownlee?" That's really funny. I guess that's a compliment. Say that one more time. I got distracted. Sorry.
Okay, so I can just say my axioms are self-authenticating.
Those wouldn't be axioms.
Okay, so the things the
Well, you could say okay. So let me respond. Let me respond secondly.
Wait,
Yeah, let me respond.
wait. Okay, so then the actor formerly known as an axiom. It's not an axiom. In fact, it's self-authenticating.
Yeah, I think that's fine. I don't think that there's a problem with that kind of answer. I think the problem is once we start getting into your moral justification, once we start getting into your let me restate that. Once you start getting into your axiology or your metaphysic, it just falls apart on itself.
Okay, well, or just take my metaphysic to be self-authenticating.
Let me think about that. Now, how would a world that's unknowable be
No, it is knowable. No, it is. It's all self-authenticating. It's via self-authentication. Look, I mean, you can give special labels.
Yeah, I think that's a great response. So give me some time and I'll think about it.
Okay.
I think it's a good response.
Okay.
I do think that I'm going to have to go because it's 12 o'clock and it's a Sunday. Now it's Sunday actually, and I have to get up in about 6 hours. But I do appreciate the conversation with you as always. So yeah.
All right. Well, good chat. Thanks everyone for watching. Like the video and share. Do it. Good chatting. All right. Peace.